Hey, this is John Branyan, a comedian, and I'm on the phone with my buddy Steve Roye, the author of the Killer Stand-Up Comedy online course. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, John.
Outstanding. I've got a few questions that I'm going to ask you. Pick your brain a little bit because you are, as far as I'm concerned, an authority on all things comedy. So, what advice would you give to new comedians that are just starting out?
Well, the biggest piece of advice that I would give to new comedians is to stay away from trying to write, quote-unquote, write your way to being funny on stage in the literal sense. A lot of people that approach the stand-up comedy thing like it's a greeting card, and it's not. And there's a couple reasons that I can say that with great confidence, and here's the deal. I'll give you a couple of reasons why, quote-unquote, trying to write jokes is the hardest possible way to try to produce stand-up comedy material. First of all, when you try to write anything, we write differently than we speak. If you don't believe that, all you got to do is record one half of a conversation you have with anybody and then transcribe that. And you'll see we speak completely differently than we are taught to write. Second thing is, audiences don't read your stand-up comedy material. They experience it as you express it on the stage.
Sure.
So there's more involved than just words alone. And if you're trying to eke out funny, trying to pluck funny from your rear end, that's a real hard way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a new comedian, you would counsel a new comedian to not try to write a million jokes and go on stage.
Well, there's a difference between trying to write your way to being funny and developing and delivering stand-up material and delivering stand-up comedy material that represents you, who you are, your sense of humor, your already developed natural expressive comedy traits. All the things that give you that funny factor in everyday life is exactly the same thing that's going to give you that funny factor on stage if you know how to structure your material, how to develop your material, how to structure your material, how to prepare to deliver your material professionally so that you give the appearance of spontaneity. Hint, hint, hint. That's a little thing there that a lot of people don't realize is that stand-up comedy is the appearance of spontaneity. And if you don't believe that, just go to a professional show 2 nights in a row.
Right.
And you will see what I'm talking about.
Okay. All right. Well, now, so you said something there that there's a difference between writing jokes and material. Can you what is the difference? Can you expand on the difference between trying to write a bunch of jokes and developing material, stand-up material?
Well, sure I can. When you're trying to write anything, first of all, writing is hard. That's the first thing. The second thing is you're only dealing with one dimension, which is the words. Words as they are on paper. Now, don't get the wrong idea. You need to have your material on paper because you can't see words coming out of your mouth. But whatever you have on paper doesn't represent the entire, and it'll never represent the entire impact that you can have with that material unless you know what are the other aspects that will give that material its laughter power. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's kind of the whole package. There's a material differs from jokes in that it is what would you say? It's the whole. It's not just a joke. It's the whole package. It's everything that person is doing on stage. Everything the comedian is doing on stage.
Absolutely. Well, if you check out any book on verbal communication, any established book by any doctor, anybody who's written a book on verbal communication, they will tell you that 93% of what you communicate when you're talking to someone else has nothing to do with the words. It has to do with voice inflection, tone, and body language, which accounts for a massive 55% of your laughter power. So 93% of your laughter power has nothing to do with the words that you have to say. And I'll give out another hint here, is if you take a look at your stand-up comedy material, if you know how to structure it, you know what a punchline is as it relates to you and who you are in everyday life, and if you transcribed that and handed it to somebody who's never seen you perform on stage, they would look at you and go, there's nothing funny here.
Right.
That's because there are elements that are missing. So you need to know how to incorporate what makes you funny into your stand-up comedy material. Otherwise, all you're doing is blind trial and error. Okay, let me write this. Let me try this. Didn't work. Okay, let me write this. Let me try this. Didn't work. Blind trial and error is the long road to hoe when it comes to stand-up comedy material. And the thing about it is each time you go up on stage, and if you don't really know what you're doing, you're subjecting yourself to, they call it bombing in stand-up comedy. I call it public humiliation.
Right.
And it's really not needed for people that do actually have comedy talent and want to capture those big laughs from what they have to say and express to an audience on stage.
Right, right. Well, and that's key, because when you think about writing, a lot of people think about writing, they do think about putting words on the page. And what you're saying is that the words on the page are basically they're indicators for what you're supposed to be doing on stage. The words are sort of there to guide you along while you are expressive with your body language and your facial expressions and the intonation in your voice, and all of that stuff is actually that has more to do with stand-up than the words themselves. Oh,
absolutely. I mean, in everyday life, when you make somebody laugh, it wasn't just the words you said. And here's another thing, too, and this is something that cracks me up with new comedians. If you're talking with somebody in conversation and they say something that you want to react to with your sense of humor, do you go, stop, hold on, let me write down a funny response, I'll get back to you in a minute?
Right. Right.
Okay? That doesn't happen. You're able to use your sense of humor along with all these other elements that you need to be aware of, and that's what creates the laugh. Well, one of the big myths out there is that what you do on stage is different than what you do in everyday conversation. I'm here to tell you that by and large, that is not the case. There are more similarities with what you do in everyday life than there are differences. And this is one of the fallacies that, and one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of stand-up comedy workshops and books and that kind of stuff, because they don't give you information that you can actually use.
Right. Right.